Hello everyone, my name is Marcia Johnson and my classmate Mary Calderon and I will be taking a look at the Benchmark Advanced Curriculum, and we'll be doing this through what's called a triangulated analysis. So 3 different lenses. The first would be whether or not it's grounded in reading theories. Also, we'll be looking for best practices in literacy instruction, and also for evidence of culturally relevant teaching. So let's get started. We'll be looking at Benchmark Advanced through the 3rd grade curriculum, and our literacy focus is going to be vocabulary. The program is built in these thematic knowledge-building units, which incorporate science and social studies themes alongside typical narrative and story-related units. And the entire school progresses in the same progression, starting with kindergarten all the way up through 6th grade. The whole school is aligned with the same topics that they move through at the same time, and that's unique to this program. Also, it incorporates very robust teacher resource kit and lots of variety of texts. Even Menya Cole mentioned the robustness of this program in her video talk to us. When we began to look for learning theories within this program, one of the first that stood out to us was constructivism, since the program is built on these knowledge-building units that go year by year with the same topics, and they're built in each grade level more and more knowledge on top of the knowledge that was created the year before, since we know in schema theory that knowledge structures are pliant and expandable. Also within constructivism, we noticed that whole language is represented as rich, authentic texts are used for reading development, such as poetry, that we noticed both in Unit 2 and Unit 8 that we studied. Poetry and rich, authentic texts were being used. Also, we saw evidence of the cognitive processing lens, and more specifically the simple view or Gog's model, which says that reading comprehension is a result of 2 processes, decoding and language. This is a program that is very rich in phonetic instruction, phonics instruction, and also vocabulary and meaning being taught, and language through texts that are read. And as the students practice listening and reading, they understand how language is being used through stories and informational texts. Also, we noticed how this program is grounded in a behavioral lens that talks about how reading development is broken down into a series of observable skills. And just like we mentioned before, phonics instruction and vocabulary building are big parts of this program. Also, there's the idea of direct instruction, which talks about how it's the teacher's job to teach strategies so that students can obtain these skills that they need to develop as readers. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see an example of a strategies and skills chart that is included in each unit in this program. And one of the strategies at the top that's talked about is metacognitive strategies and fix-up to aid students in reading comprehension. Also, we noticed that the social learning lens is represented. Vygotsky's idea that people learn as a result of their social interactions with each other. And this was definitely evidenced in suggestions in the program procedures for differentiation, which include the teacher scaffolding the first reading of a text, either reading to or with the students, or having them partner read. Also, in a share and reflect procedure that's included in the curriculum, students work together in designated partner groups to complete learning objectives. So all of these theories we found, plus there were so many more that we could talk about that we noticed. This program is grounded richly in multiple theories.
Next, we moved on to best practices for vocabulary instruction, and we found 3 areas to focus on. In Benchmark Advance, each week of each unit features both general academic vocabulary and domain-specific vocabulary. So general academic vocabulary are those words that are likely to be used across multiple subject areas. So focusing on these words will help students understand academic tasks and directions across the disciplines of reading, writing, science, math, and social studies. So in Unit 2, Week 1, some of those words included reflection, moral, measured, and resist. Then, of course, there are domain-specific vocabulary that students will need to access that particular text. And examples from the same unit are locomotive and sexton. So this is important because general academic words are going to support literacy and comprehension across the curriculum. And domain-specific words are going to build background knowledge and support deeper understanding of the content that the student is experiencing at that moment. The next best practices that we focused on are Benchmark's use of graphic organizers and think-alouds. As the quote says, graphic organizers make learning vocabulary visible. In this slide, you can see several examples of the graphic organizers Benchmark incorporates. In the Making Meaning with Words, students will identify words that keep them from understanding the text and record them in the organizer. There's the word web, which encourages students to develop definition, synonyms, antonyms, and related ideas for a given word. In fact, each week there's a particular organizer activity printed right in the student's consumable text. This may be a concept web, a Frere model. Also, the electronic resources of the curriculum have different organizers for teachers to print and use at their discretion. Graphic organizers make vocabulary learning visible by providing structured visual representations of word meanings, relationships, and also examples. They help students organize information about a word like its definition, the synonyms, and ideally make it easier to understand and retain those words. Think-alouds also help with vocabulary acquisition by making the process of understanding new words visible. So when a teacher verbalizes their thoughts while reading, they can demonstrate vocabulary skills such as how to use context clues, rereading strategies, and making connections with prior knowledge to figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words. So this modeling helps students learn how to actively engage with the text and become better vocabulary learners. The last best practice we focused on is Benchmark's use of explicit instruction for vocabulary. So explicit vocabulary instruction is important because it directly teaches students new words, their meanings, and how to use them. This is going to lead to improved comprehension and overall academic success. So by focusing on key vocabulary words and providing multiple opportunities for practice and review, explicit instruction helps students build a stronger foundation for understanding the complex text they will be reading. Benchmark Advance uses the Define, Example, Ask routine for introducing new words to students. In step 1, the students are given a student-friendly definition of the word. Next, they're given an example or a non-example or both. In step 3, students are asked a question that requires them to use the new word in their answer. This routine is even written step by step in the Teacher's Edition to provide added support for the teacher. Our culturally responsive education scorecard analysis gave the curriculum an emerging awareness score in all 3 categories. Some of our key findings were, for the representation score, we felt that the curriculum represents some groups in diverse and dynamic ways, but not all. For the social justice orientation score, we felt that there were few opportunities for teachers to practice cultural responsiveness. And for the teacher material score, our key finding was that teacher materials provide guidance in making real-life connections between curriculum and student lives. Our CRE analysis showed us that, in fact, diverse ethnicities and nationalities are actually not portrayed. In fact, most of the story characters are racially ambiguous. The curriculum doesn't really explicitly identify any ethnicities. But of this, certain groups appear to not be represented at all, and these would include Asians and Native Americans. Our CRE analysis also showed us that guidance is actually provided on giving students opportunities to contribute prior knowledge and experience with the topic. In fact, Benchmark Advance uses many anchor charts, including the one shown here, making connections. So the curriculum does encourage students to engage in discussions that would reflect their different cultural viewpoints.
Moving now to a discussion of strengths, deficiencies, and recommendations within the program. One strength is that it is richly grounded in multiple theories, as we previously discussed. But also because it is such a rich program, it can be overwhelming for a teacher. There's so many components to choose from and different kinds of texts. So when teachers are encouraged to be selective, to know their students, to know which types of texts would be the most appropriate. As in Mary's case, the administration was encouraging her to focus on the close text with her students, and this is her first year in the program, so that's what they're mainly focusing on. But also to realize that kindergarten students would have the advantage because their knowledge is going to be built each year. But a student starting at 5th or 6th grade within this program might not have as much schema built up for new knowledge to be built on.
While Benchmark incorporates many best practices, and we noted them previously, we felt that still some recommendations can be made. First, Benchmark includes between 2 to 3 stories in student text each week. Unfortunately, vocabulary is not carried over between these texts. And as the quote says, students need to be given multiple chances to practice words and see them in different contexts. So repeating the vocabulary across the selected texts would be a helpful improvement. Next, Benchmark does use explicit vocabulary instruction for word meanings and practice, but it does not regularly or even frequently explicitly teach word learning strategies. These would include prefixes, suffixes, Greek and Latin roots. So teaching these strategies would significantly enhance student vocabulary by giving them tools to make meaning of unfamiliar words and make connections between related words. So this morphology helps students understand how word parts contribute to a word's meaning. So the student may be able to infer the meaning of a new word even if they haven't been explicitly taught the word. Also, vocabulary activities with creative approaches are limited in Benchmark. We're not going to count graphic organizers as a creative approach. Vocabulary games or student-created visual representations of vocabulary words is differentiating vocabulary instruction that may really help some students. And part of that might include an interactive word wall that can launch off creative vocabulary activities like word sorts, Pictionary, or connecting words. At the very least, a word wall should be incorporated to Benchmark as a visual support, providing constant visual reference for students, helping their learning and recall of their vocabulary words. In our CRE analysis, we came to the conclusion that Benchmark Advance could enhance its current surface level representation of characters. As we mentioned earlier, many of the characters in Benchmark Advance are racially ambiguous. And as the quote explains, leaving out diversity may imply that it's not important, and that would be a disservice to our students. We also felt that they could make cultural context more central to the story instead of just as a backdrop. So including cultural context in stories helps students by promoting deeper understanding and interest in diverse perspectives. It enhances the overall learning. So by exploring different cultural contexts, students can connect with characters and narratives on a more personal level. And this leads to increased engagement and motivation. And furthermore, this approach encourages critical thinking about things like values and ethics, codes, and hopefully broadens the student's view of the world. It prepares them for a more inclusive and interconnected world.